world of social media can blur lines, turning strangers into familiar faces and followers into something far more sinister. For Emma Cartwright, an ambitious content creator, her growing online presence was both a dream come true and a potential nightmare. She had worked tirelessly to cultivate her image, sharing her daily routines, fashion tips, and the occasional personal anecdote to build a connection with her audience. The likes, comments, and growing follower count made the long hours worthwhile. But Emma was about to learn the cost of sharing so much of herself online. It started subtly, with a follower who seemed more devoted than most. Among her regular commenters, one username appeared again and again, HumanTouch99. At first, their comments were harmless, sweet even. "Your energy is so uplifting. I feel like I've known you forever. You're an inspiration. Thank you for sharing your life with us." Emma prided herself on engaging with her fans, so she liked the comments and replied with a polite, "Thank you." She barely gave the username a second thought. But as weeks turned into months, HumanTouch99's messages became more personal. "The way you laugh, it's contagious. It makes me feel like I'm right there with you. I noticed your ring finger is bare. How can someone so perfect still be single? Your hands are so elegant. I bet your touch feels like magic." The comments made Emma uncomfortable. She told herself it was just a harmless fan. Social media came with its share of strange interactions after all. But there was something unsettling about the specificity. And then there was the timing. The comments would appear minutes after she posted, no matter the time of day. It was as though HumanTouch99 was always watching. The first DM. One evening after wrapping up a long day of filming, Emma sat in bed scrolling through her messages. Most were from fans thanking her for her content, brands wanting to collaborate, or the occasional spam. But a new DM request caught her attention. It was from HumanTouch99. The message began innocuously enough. "Do you ever think about how much impact you've had on your followers? You've changed my life, Emma. I feel like I've grown so much just by watching you." But as Emma scrolled down, the tone shifted. "Do you ever think about the power of touch? The way it lingers, even after the moment has passed? I imagine what it would feel like to hold your hand, just once, to feel connected to you in a way words can't describe. I know you'd feel it too." Emma's stomach churned. She stared at the message, the unsettling intimacy of the words making her skin crawl. She debated responding, but decided against it. Instead, she blocked the account and went to bed, telling herself it was over. The gifts. For a few weeks, life returned to normal. Emma threw herself into her content, collaborating with brands, and focusing on growing her platform. But then the packages started arriving. At first, it was small things. A silk scarf she had casually mentioned in a video, a hardcover copy of a book she'd recommended, even a limited edition lipstick she had once worn on camera. There was never a sender's name, just a plain card with the words, "A touch of thoughtfulness for someone who deserves it." Her friends laughed it off. "Looks like you've got a secret admirer," her roommate Leah teased. But Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that came with each package. The items were so specific, as though the sender had memorized every detail about her. One evening, after unboxing yet another anonymous gift, Emma found herself staring at the scarf. She hadn't mentioned it more than once, yet here it was, folded neatly in her hands. Was it a coincidence? Or had someone been watching more closely than she realized? The warning signs. Emma became more vigilant. She stopped geotagging her locations in real time and only posted photos long after she had left a place. But the unease persisted. One night during a live stream, Kwanda, Emma noticed a comment from a new account. "That red sweater looks even softer in person. I wonder how it feels against your skin." Emma froze. Her heart pounded as she stared at the comment. The sweater was new, a gift from her sister. She had never worn it in any of her previous posts. She ended the live stream early and called the police. The officers took her report seriously, but admitted there wasn't much they could do without direct threats or evidence of stalking. "Just be careful," one officer advised, "and maybe take a break from social media." But how could she? Her career depended on it. The glove. Emma woke one morning to find a small package sitting on her doorstep. Her name was scrawled on the front in neat, precise handwriting. She hadn't ordered anything, and the sight of the box made her stomach churn. Inside was a single black leather glove and a note. Every touch leaves an impression. Let this one be mine. Emma threw the glove into the trash, but she couldn't shake the feeling of the leather against her skin. It felt invasive, like the act of touching it had left a mark deeper than she could see. The phantom touch. That night, Emma was jolted awake by a sensation. Fingers, warm and deliberate, trailing across her arm. She bolted upright, her heart pounding. Her bedroom was silent, her door locked, and her windows shut tight. But the feeling lingered, as though the touch had seeped into her skin. From that night on, the phantom touches came frequently. A hand brushing her hair as she sat at her desk. Fingers grazing her neck as she cooked dinner. No matter where she went, she couldn't escape it. The final message. Desperate, Emma announced she was taking a break from social media. She posted a farewell message, thanking her followers for their support. The response was overwhelmingly positive, but one comment stood out. No matter where you go, my touch will follow. Emma deleted the comment immediately, but it was too late. The words were etched into her mind. The disappearance. A week later, Emma vanished. Her friends found her apartment undisturbed, her belongings left untouched. On her nightstand was the black leather glove she had thrown away weeks ago, and a note. Some touches last forever. To this day, Emma's story remains a chilling reminder of how the virtual world can bleed into reality in ways no one expects. There's a corner of the city where the streetlights flicker too often, their buzz audible even from a distance. At the edge of that dimly lit intersection stands an old building with boarded-up windows. Despite its neglected appearance, the faint strains of music, a ghostly waltz, seem to drift from within on certain nights. The locals called it the Phantom Dance Studio. Whispers about its haunted past swirled like autumn leaves. Decades ago, it was the most prestigious dance studio in the city, known for its lavish performances and talented students. But one winter night, the entire company of dancers vanished without a trace. No bodies, no explanations. Just the faint scent of lavender lingering in the empty space. Emma had heard the stories, of course. Who hadn't? But to her, it wasn't a place of tragedy or horror. It was an opportunity. As a rising influencer struggling to stand out in a sea of content creators, she saw the Phantom Dance Studio as the perfect backdrop for her next viral video. Ghost stories always pulled in views. All right, guys, she said to her camera in a live stream that evening, bundled in a heavy jacket against the November chill. The flickering streetlights cast strange, shifting shadows on her face as she grinned confidently at her phone. We're doing this. No turning back now. Welcome to Dancing with Ghosts, exploring the Phantom Studio. Her viewers flooded the chat with a mix of excitement and warnings. Don't mess with this stuff. I heard people disappear in there. Do it for the views. Emma smirked at the comments. Come on, guys, it's just an old building. I'll be fine. The door creaked loudly as she pushed it open, her flashlight cutting through the dusty gloom. A thick silence blanketed the air, broken only by the soft crunch of debris beneath her boots. She panned her camera around, revealing the interior to her audience. The studio was shockingly intact. Cracked mirrors lined the walls, and the warped wooden floor still bore the faint scuffs of countless dance rehearsals. A long bar stretched across one side of the room, its once polished surface dulled with age. Emma's flashlight caught a grand piano in the corner, its lid propped open, the keys yellowed and cracked. Not so scary, is it? Emma whispered, though her voice echoed unnaturally in the space. She moved closer to the mirrors, her camera following. The chat buzzed with messages. Don't touch anything. Is it just me, or is something in the mirror? Why does it feel like someone's watching? Emma rolled her eyes at the comments. You guys are such babies, she said. but her bravado faltered slightly when she caught a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. She whipped her flashlight toward it, but the beam revealed nothing, just her own reflection staring back. Or was it? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her reflection seemed too slow to mimic her movements, lagging for a fraction of a second before catching up. A chill prickled at the back of her neck, but she laughed it off. "It's just the cracked glass," she said to herself, her voice trembling slightly. The faint strains of music reached her ears, soft at first like a distant memory. She froze, holding her breath. The piano. Its keys moved on their own, pressed by invisible fingers, playing a hauntingly familiar waltz. Emma's heart raced, but she forced a smile for the camera. "Okay, that's creepy," she admitted. "But probably just some kind of old mechanism, right? You know how antique stuff can be." The chat was less convinced. "Leave now! This isn't funny anymore. Something's behind you." Emma's smile faltered. She turned slowly, her flashlight beam sweeping the room. Nothing. Just shadows pooling in the corners, stretching unnaturally long across the walls. And then she felt it. A touch. Light, almost tender, brushing against her shoulder. She spun around, her breath hitching. There was no one there. "Probably my jacket," she muttered, trying to calm the rising panic in her chest. But then it happened again. Firmer this time, like fingers pressing into her wrist. She gasped and stumbled back, dropping her phone. It clattered to the floor, the live stream capturing the moment her flashlight flickered and died. The music grew louder, swelling to fill the room. Emma's breathing was ragged as she scrambled to pick up her phone, clutching it tightly as her only source of light. The mirror directly in front of her caught her attention. Her reflection stood still, staring back at her with a strange, knowing smile. Emma froze. She hadn't smiled. She couldn't even feel her face properly. It was numb with fear. The reflection lifted a hand and beckoned. "No," Emma whispered, backing away. "This isn't real. It's just a trick, lighting or something." But the reflection didn't stop. It stepped forward, out of the mirror. Invisible hands gripped Emma's arms, her legs, forcing her body to move against her will. She stumbled forward, her feet dragging across the floor in a clumsy parody of a dance. "No!" she screamed, her voice swallowed by the growing music. The scent of lavender filled the air, cloying and suffocating. She felt cold lips brush against her cheek, and a voice, soft and mournful, whispered in her ear, "You came to dance, so dance." Her body spun, leapt, twisted. The movements were graceful, elegant, yet completely out of her control. The shadows on the walls swirled around her, taking on the shapes of dancers, their hollow eyes watching her every move. The last thing her viewers saw before the stream abruptly ended was her reflection in the mirror, smiling serenely, her eyes filled with a strange, otherworldly light. When the authorities arrived the next morning, they found nothing but her phone lying in the center of the room, still streaming to an empty audience. And if you pass by the Phantom Dance Studio on certain nights, you might hear the soft strains of a piano, accompanied by the sound of footsteps spinning endlessly across the floor. Some say Emma is still there, dancing with the ghosts she sought to mock. Others claim to have seen her face in the mirrors, pleading silently for help. But no one dares enter, because once the studio has you in its grasp, it never lets go. Chapter 1. A Simple Request. Social media had always been Sarah Mitchell's sanctuary. At 29, she lived a quiet life in her downtown Chicago apartment, working as a freelance graphic designer. Most days blurred into nights of her laptop screen glowing against the city skyline. The world outside her window was chaotic and fast-paced, but inside her tiny space, Sarah felt safe. Her only companions were her work, her playlists and Muffin, her chubby tabby cat. She had a small circle of friends and only used Facebook to stay connected with them. But more recently, she had ventured into public groups, hoping to network with other creatives and perhaps land more freelance gigs. One Friday evening, as she sipped a glass of red wine and scrolled through a group called Chicago Creatives, a notification popped up. Ethan Cole sent you a friend request. The name didn't ring a bell. Curious, Sarah clicked on the profile. Ethan's picture was an artsy black and white shot of a man by a lake. His hooded figure was barely visible, the image haunting in its obscurity. He seemed to be a photographer. His page was filled with moody shots of Chicago alleys, mist-covered forests, and vintage-style portraits. His posts were sparse, but his bio read, photographer, lover of moments, Chicago-based. It seemed harmless enough. Sarah hesitated but ultimately clicked accept. After all, networking was the whole point of joining the group. Chapter 2, Getting Closer. At first, Ethan's presence on her profile was barely noticeable. He liked a few of her posts, commented occasionally on her graphic designs, and even complimented Muffin on one of her pictures. What a regal-looking cat. Beautiful. His tone was warm, kind, and non-intrusive. Over the next few weeks, they started chatting sporadically. Ethan was reserved but intriguing. He spoke of his love for photography and how it was his way of capturing fleeting beauty in a chaotic world. He shared that he was an introvert, someone who found solace in art. Sarah related to that. She had always been a bit of a loner too. The conversations felt innocent, even enjoyable. He would ask about her work and compliment her creativity. Slowly, Sarah began to let her guard down. But then, the little comments started. I love how the sunlight hits your window, he messaged her one evening after she posted a picture of Muffin lounging on her windowsill. The comment gave her pause. She had never mentioned where she lived. It's just an observation, she told herself. He probably recognized the area from the photo. A few days later, Ethan messaged again. This time, his words unsettled her. I think I passed your building today. Do you live near that cafe on 6th Street? I'd love to grab a coffee with you sometime. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her unease growing. She had never told him her address, let alone her favorite cafe. How could he know? She decided not to respond. Chapter 3, A Gift at the Door. 2 weeks passed and Sarah did her best to ignore Ethan's messages. She told herself he was just being overly friendly. Maybe she was overreacting. People on social media could be strange, but it didn't always mean danger. One evening, she returned home after a quick grocery run to find a package sitting outside her apartment door. There was no label, no return address, just a plain brown box, neatly taped. Curious but cautious, Sarah carried it inside. She grabbed a knife, carefully slicing the tape. Inside was a picture frame. Her blood ran cold when she saw what it held. A photo of her sitting at her desk, working on her laptop. The shot was perfect, as though taken with professional equipment. But the detail that made her stomach twist was the angle. It was taken through her apartment window. Sarah's hands trembled as she placed the frame down, her mind racing. How long has someone been watching me? There was no note, no explanation. The only person who had shown such interest in her was Ethan. Shaking, she opened her laptop and immediately blocked him on Facebook. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside her window made her heart race. Chapter 4, The Obsession Deepens. Blocking Ethan didn't stop him. The next morning, Sarah's inbox was flooded with emails from an unknown address. The subject lines read, "Why did you block me?" and "We were so connected." The messages were a mix of desperation and anger. "I just wanted to show you how much I care," one email read. "I'm not like the others. I see you for who you are." Another email was more ominous. "You can't hide from me, Sarah. You're everything I've ever wanted." By the end of the week, the emails turned into text messages. "I love the way your hair looks when you're working. You're mine, Sarah. Don't forget that." Panic set in. She had never given Ethan her phone number. How had he gotten it? Sarah contacted the police, but there was little they could do. Stalking cases like this often hit dead ends unless there was physical harm involved. She changed her number, deleted her Facebook account, and even started closing her curtains during the day. But none of it stopped Ethan. Chapter 5, The Tapping at the Window. It was 2 a.m. when Sarah first heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was faint but distinct, coming from her bedroom window. Her apartment was on the third floor. Sarah froze, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might burst. Slowly, she turned toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but she could see the faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass. She scrambled for her phone and dialed 911, whispering frantically to the operator. The police arrived within minutes, but when they searched the area, they found nothing. One officer, however, noticed a faint smudge on the window, a greasy print of a hand. "Do you know anyone who might want to harm you?" the officer asked. Sarah could only think of one name. Chapter 6. The Final Message. Determined to leave the city, Sarah began making plans to move. She told no one where she was going, not even her closest friends. She felt a small sense of relief as she packed her belongings, knowing she'd soon be far away from Ethan's reach. The night before her departure, her phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Her heart dropped. It was a friend request from an account with no profile picture. The name was Ethan Cole. Her hands trembled as she clicked on the request. The account had no posts, no friends, just a single line in the bio. "See you tonight." The lights in her apartment suddenly flickered, then went out. In the darkness, she heard it again. Tap, 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 in epilogue, an active profile. When the police arrived the next morning, Sarah was gone. Her apartment was eerily quiet, save for one unsettling detail. On the wall, scrawled in red, were the words, "Human touch is the most intimate connection." Her Facebook profile, thought to be deleted, became active again days later. It now posts eerie photos of dimly lit streets, shadowy figures, and messages that read, It started with a notification. The soft ping of my phone pulled me from the monotony of my evening. I was scrolling through an endless sea of memes and updates on social media. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart froze. "Emily Sanders tagged you in a post." I stared at the notification, unblinking. Emily Sanders, my girlfriend, had been dead for over a year. I clicked on it instinctively, my pulse quickening. The post wasn't just a picture or a video. It was a simple, chilling message. "Do you remember this place?" It was accompanied by a photo of a secluded spot near the woods, where we used to meet when we wanted to escape the world. The photo was perfect, down to the slant of the sunlight cutting through the trees. It was our spot. But how? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone hacked her account. Maybe it was a cruel joke. But as I stared at the screen, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant to respond. I didn't. Instead, I closed the app, turned off my phone, and poured myself a drink. Chapter 1. Memories in the Dark. That night, I couldn't sleep. The post lingered in my mind like a shadow, creeping in at the edges of my thoughts. Every creak of the house sounded like her soft footsteps, and every gust of wind through my open window carried the faint scent of her vanilla perfume. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A hacker. A glitch. But deep down, I felt the stirrings of something darker. Something I couldn't explain. Emily and I had always shared an intense connection. Even after her death, I'd find myself talking to her when I was alone. Grief does strange things to the mind, they say. But this was different. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. The screen illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I hesitated before picking it up. Another notification. This time it was a direct message from Emily's account. "Why are you ignoring me?" My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. My hands trembled as I typed back. "Who is this? Stop using Emily's account." The reply was immediate. "You know it's me." A chill crept up my spine. The words were so casual, so familiar. It felt like her, but it couldn't be. Chapter 2. Whispers from the Past. The messages didn't stop. Every day I'd wake up to new notifications. At first they were harmless. Questions about my day, reminders of our time together, even old inside jokes only she and I would know. Remember when we got caught in the rain at the fair? I missed those late night drives. The familiarity was unsettling. Whoever was behind this account knew too much, things no one else could possibly know. But soon the messages turned darker. Do you ever think about what happened to me? You left me behind. I miss your touch. The final straw came when I received a video. It was a short clip, just a few seconds long, but it stopped my heart. It showed our spot in the woods, filmed from Emily's perspective. The camera swayed slightly as though she were walking. Her voice, soft and familiar, whispered, "I'm here, Alex. Why won't you come?" I dropped my phone, my hands shaking. The video was new. It wasn't an old memory or a shared clip from our past. Someone or something had filmed it recently. Chapter 3. The Woods. I had to go. I couldn't explain why, but I felt an overwhelming pull to that place. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was grief. Or maybe deep down, I wanted to believe it was her. The woods were just as I remembered them. Tall trees loomed overhead, their bare branches clawing at the sky. The air was cold, and the faint scent of damp earth filled my nostrils. As I approached the clearing, the wind seemed to die. The world grew eerily silent, save for the sound of my own breathing. Then I saw her. She stood with her back to me, her figure silhouetted against the dim light filtering through the trees. Her long hair cascaded down her back, just like it used to. "Emily!" I called out, my voice trembling. She turned slowly and my breath caught in my throat. It was her, but it wasn't. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes gleamed unnaturally in the fading light. But her smile, it was the same. "I knew you'd come," she said softly. Chapter 4. The Grip of the Past. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. My mind screamed that this wasn't real, but my heart ached at the sight of her. "You're not real," I whispered. She tilted her head, her smile faltering. "Why do you say that? Don't I feel real?" She reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was cold, almost icy, but there was a strange warmth beneath it, as if her touch was seeping into me. Memories flooded my mind. Our first date, our late-night talks, her laughter, and then darker memories. The car crash, her lifeless body in the wreckage, the funeral. I pulled my hand away, gasping. "Stop it!" Her expression darkened. "You promised you'd never leave me, Alex." Chapter 5. Haunted Connections. Over the next few days, she began to appear everywhere. I'd see her reflection in the mirror, hear her voice whispering my name when I was alone. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from her account. "Why are you running from me? I'm not going anywhere." The world around me began to change. Shadows stretched longer, darker, as though they were alive. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. At night, I'd feel the weight of her body pressing against the bed, her cold breath on the back of my neck. Chapter 6. The Truth Revealed. I couldn't take it anymore. I returned to the woods, determined to end it. "Emily!" I screamed into the darkness. "What do you want from me?" Her voice echoed around me, cold and hollow. "I want you to remember. I want you to feel what I felt." The truth hit me like a thunderbolt. The crash. It wasn't an accident. I had been driving, and I had been drinking. She had begged me to slow down, but I hadn't listened. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. She appeared before me, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and rage. "Sorry isn't enough, Alex. You left me there to die." Chapter 7. The Final Goodbye. Her touch burned this time, searing into my skin. I felt her pain, her fear, her anger. My vision blurred and I fell to my knees. "Please," I begged, "let me go." For a moment, her expression softened. She leaned in close, her icy breath brushing against my ear. "You'll never be free of me," she whispered. And then she was gone. I woke up in the clearing, alone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from her account. Goodbye, Alex, for now. I deleted my social media that night, but every time I close my eyes, I still see her face. And I know she'll be back. Ending note. In the age of constant connection, some bonds refuse to die, even those forged in guilt and grief. It started with a simple scroll. Annette had been searching for a vintage bookshelf for weeks, scouring thrift stores and online groups with no luck. Then she stumbled upon a listing on Facebook Marketplace. Antique bookshelf, handcrafted, great condition. The photos showed a sturdy, elegant piece of furniture, exactly what she wanted. The price? Too good to be true. $50. The seller's name was Roger. His profile picture was ordinary. A middle-aged man with glasses and a slight smile, standing in front of a cluttered garage. His reviews were glowing, and he seemed trustworthy. They exchanged messages, and his responses were polite, almost overly kind. Can we meet tomorrow? My address is listed in the details. Roger's message came through as Annette sat in her dimly lit apartment. The address wasn't too far, a quiet suburb just outside the city. She agreed, feeling a flicker of excitement. The next day, a crisp chill hung in the air as Annette pulled up to the house. It was old, its wooden siding faded and chipped. The lawn was overgrown, with weeds snaking up through the cracks in the driveway. Something about the house felt wrong, but she pushed the thought aside. Roger greeted her at the door. He looked just like his picture, but there was an oddness to him. His handshake lingered, his grip clammy and cold. Come in, he said, his voice too enthusiastic. The bookshelf is just in the back room. You'll love it. The house smelled musty, like damp wood and something faintly metallic. The walls were lined with old photographs of strangers, black and white images of stern-looking families, their expressions devoid of joy. This way, Roger said, leading her down a narrow hallway. Annette followed hesitantly, the floor creaking under her steps. In the back room stood the bookshelf, just as beautiful as the photos had promised. Annette ran her fingers over the smooth wood, marveling at the craftsmanship. I'll take it, she said quickly, eager to finalize the deal and leave. Roger's smile widened. Wonderful. But before we load it into your car, I have a small request. I know this sounds strange, but could you shake my hand again? It's a little ritual I have for good luck in sales. Annette hesitated, his request unsettling, but she shrugged it off, attributing it to harmless eccentricity. She extended her hand and Roger clasped it firmly. This time, the handshake felt different. His grip tightened, his fingers digging into her skin. She tried to pull away, but his hold was unrelenting. Thank you, he murmured, his voice low and strange. He let go abruptly and Annette stumbled back, her heart racing. By the time she got home, her unease had faded into relief. The bookshelf looked perfect in her living room, and she tried to dismiss Roger's odd behavior as nothing more than awkwardness. But that night, she woke up with a start. Her hand burned where Roger had touched it, the skin red and swollen. She winced, examining the marks, thin, almost imperceptible lines that looked like fingerprints. The next day, the sensation spread. Her entire arm felt heavy, as though something was pulling at her from the inside. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Roger. She opened Facebook to message him, but his profile was gone. No reviews, no photos, nothing. It was as if he'd never existed. Over the next week, Annette's condition worsened. The burning sensation in her hand turned into a dull ache that crept up her arm and into her chest. She began hearing whispers in her apartment, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere. One night, as she sat in the living room, she noticed something strange. The bookshelf seemed different. The wood was darker, almost wet-looking, and she swore it had shifted slightly. She leaned in to inspect it, running her hand along the edge. Suddenly, she recoiled. The wood was warm, almost alive, and for a brief moment, she felt it pulse under her fingers. The whispers grew louder. Annette backed away, her breathing shallow. She tried to convince herself it was all in her head, but deep down she knew something was terribly wrong. By the second week, Annette could barely function. Her body felt foreign, as if something inside her was changing. The whispers had become constant, a maddening hum that followed her everywhere. Desperate for answers, she drove back to Roger's house. But when she arrived, the house was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. She stumbled out of the car, her head spinning. Had she imagined the entire thing? That night, the whispers became screams. Annette sat huddled in the corner of her living room, staring at the bookshelf. It seemed to breathe, the wood swelling and contracting rhythmically. Then she saw them. Hands, hundreds of them, pressing against the surface of the bookshelf, their outlines visible beneath the grain. They clawed and twisted, as if trying to escape. Annette's own hand burned violently, and she looked down to see the same lines, Roger's fingerprints, spreading up her arm like a vine. A sudden, unbearable pain shot through her chest, and she collapsed to the floor. When Annette woke up, the room was silent. The bookshelf stood empty, its wood smooth and unmarked. But Annette was no longer herself. She moved mechanically, her eyes dull, her expression blank. She opened her laptop and logged into Facebook Marketplace. Antique desk, handcrafted, great condition, $50. The whispers began again. The phone buzzed on Emily's bedstand in the dead of night, breaking the stillness of the room. She had long since turned off the lights, tucked herself into the thick quilt, and started to drift off to sleep. But there it was, an unmistakable notification sound that tore through the silence like a jolt of electricity. She reached for the phone, squinting as her tired eyes adjusted to the brightness. New message from unknown. Curiosity pried her open, even though her gut told her to ignore it. There had been strange messages before, but this one seemed different. No name, no profile picture. Just a simple message, yet it felt heavy. I see you. Emily's heart rate picked up, but she dismissed it as a prank. After all, she was no stranger to creepy messages on social media. She was a content creator with a decent following on Instagram, so there were always random strangers reaching out. But this message, this one felt different. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't playful or flirtatious. It was cold, and it made her skin crawl. She tried to brush it off, turning the phone face down on the bed and closing her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. The message gnawed at her, crawling through her mind, sticking to her like a shadow. An hour passed, then 2. She tossed and turned, but sleep wouldn't take her. The phone buzzed again. New message from unknown. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't even have to look at the screen to know what it said. She had to check, of course. She had to. I've been watching you for days. Her stomach flipped. The feeling was different now. Not just a creeping sense of discomfort, but a tangible fear. Someone was watching her. Someone was tracking her every move. But who? And how? She pushed herself out of bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the room, the dark corners now seeming darker. She stared at the phone screen, every muscle in her body tense, waiting for something more. There was no reply button, just a single, chilling image. A blurry figure in the distance, barely visible but unmistakably human, standing on the edge of what looked like her street. She froze, heart thundering in her chest. How did they know where she lived? It couldn't be a coincidence. Could it? Instinctively, she got up and moved to the window. She peeked through the blinds, her eyes scanning the quiet, empty street below. The darkness stretched out, far and wide, like an endless void. Nothing moved. But the phone buzzed again. You didn't see me, but I see you. Her pulse raced as she stumbled back from the window. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. She felt a sudden urge to check the locks on her doors, to make sure everything was secure. She crossed the room, but before her hand could even reach the door handle, the phone buzzed once more. The new message was accompanied by something worse. A video. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't stop herself from tapping it. The screen flickered before revealing something that made her blood run cold. It was her, standing in her own living room, looking down at her phone. But the camera angle was off, as if someone was standing just behind her, capturing the moment. She had never seen anyone there. Emily staggered backward, her hand trembling as it clutched the phone. She was alone in her apartment. She had been alone all night. Yet here was a video of her from a perspective that couldn't possibly have been filmed by herself. Someone had been in her house. Someone had been close enough to record her. Her phone buzzed again. "I felt your breath. I can feel your touch through the screen." A chill swept through her, creeping beneath her skin. It felt as though the words themselves were crawling on her, burrowing into her body, sinking into her flesh like cold fingers. She dropped the phone in horror, the device skittering across the floor, the screen still glowing with those terrible words. "I'll be closer tomorrow." Emily's breath came in quick, shallow gasps. Panic set in. She grabbed her phone, but the screen had gone black, the message gone, as though it had never existed. Her hands were shaking as she fumbled with the phone, trying to call someone, anyone. But the screen flickered again, this time showing a picture of her own face, distorted, contorted in fear. A picture from a time when she was looking at the camera, unaware of the dark figure behind her. Suddenly, the lights in her apartment flickered, the hum of the power lines outside growing louder, more oppressive. The temperature dropped, her breath coming out in visible puffs. She wasn't imagining it. Someone was here. She ran to the door, checking the locks one more time, but it was no use. The door flew open before she could react, the cold air rushing in with a force that knocked her off balance. A shadow moved quickly in the doorway, too fast for her to register. It was tall, too tall, a silhouette that seemed to take up more space than it should. A cold hand brushed her shoulder. The touch was unmistakable, too real, too solid. It was as though the very essence of that touch had seeped through her, into her skin, and she could feel it, like a brand marking her. She spun around, but there was no one there. Yet the phone lay on the floor beside her, glowing, the screen reflecting something much worse. A message that now felt like a threat too personal, too intimate to ignore. "You're mine now." And then it clicked. The touch, the unsettling sense of being watched, the whispers that crept into her thoughts in the night. It wasn't just the physical proximity she feared. It was something deeper, something that had been woven into her every move, her every thought. The story of the Instagram mystery man wasn't just about someone watching her. It was about someone who had touched her soul, with every message, every video, every word, drawing her into a trap she couldn't escape. And now, it was too late. Her phone buzzed one final time, the notification unreadable in her hand, as a cold hand, not hers, brushed against her skin again. The next morning, Emily's phone was found on the floor next to her bed, but there was no sign of Emily anywhere. Her friends and family searched for her for weeks, but she had vanished without a trace. The only thing that remained were her social media posts left hauntingly empty, as if she had been erased from existence. And every so often, a new message would appear in her inbox from the same unknown account. "I'm closer than you think." Whoever the Instagram mystery man was, he had claimed her completely, and the chilling thought lingered. He was still out there, waiting for his next victim.